The wind howled like a wounded animal, tearing through the mountains with icy claws. Snowflakes swirled in chaotic fury, turning the highway into a ghostly blur. Mitch Callahan gripped the steering wheel of his battered truck, knuckles white, squinting through the storm. He was already 12 hours behind schedule. Another delay could cost him his job. But then a shadow in the ditch caught his eye. A black SUV, half buried in snow, its front end crumpled against a tree. Mitch cursed under his breath. He shouldn't stop. Not in this weather. Not with a trailer full of perishable medical supplies. But something, instinct, guilt, maybe his father's voice in his head, made him hit the brakes. The truck skidded to a stop and he flung open the door, the wind nearly knocking him over. The SUV's windshield was frosted, but inside a man slumped over the wheel, unmoving. Mitch yanked the door open and the cold hit him like a slap. The driver was older, late 50s, his face pale, a trickle of blood drying on his temple. Then Mitch saw it, the insignia on the man's coat. A star. Navy. High-ranking. The man's eyelids fluttered. He gasped, grabbing Mitch's wrist with surprising strength. "You don't understand," he rasped. "They'll come for it." His grip tightened, then went slack as his head lolled back. Mitch's pulse pounded in his ears. This wasn't just an accident. This was trouble. And now, whether he liked it or not, he was part of it. He dragged the man into his truck, the blizzard screaming around them. Somewhere out there, something, or someone was hunting. And by morning, Mitch would find out just how deep this storm went. The heater in Mitch's cab groaned against the storm, barely keeping the cold at bay. Admiral Whitmore, now sprawled across the passenger seat, shivered violently, his breath shallow. Mitch pressed an old blanket against the man's bleeding temple, his mind racing. He should have called an ambulance. Should have stayed with the wreck. But the radio had crackled with static when he tried, and the nearest town was 30 miles of ice and blackness ahead. No choice but to keep moving. The truck's headlights carved a fragile path through the snow as Mitch white-knuckled the wheel. Every gust of wind threatened to send them skidding into the abyss. Beside him, the Admiral stirred, his fingers twitching toward his coat pocket. "Don't stop," he slurred, his voice thin. "They'll be watching the roads." Mitch shot him a glance. "Who, they?" But the man's eyes rolled back, his body going slack again. A folded corner of paper peeked from his pocket, something official, stamped with red ink. Mitch didn't touch it. Whatever this was, it smelled like government secrets, and he'd had enough trouble in his life without adding treason to the list. The tires hit a patch of black ice. The trailer fishtailed, and Mitch swore, fighting to keep control. In that heartbeat of chaos, the Admiral's coat fell open, revealing a sidearm strapped to his ribs. Mitch's stomach dropped. Since when did admirals carry loaded weapons on solo drives? The man wasn't just hurt, he was running. And now, so was Mitch. A sign loomed in the darkness. Barlow's Diner, 5 miles. Shelter. Maybe a landline. Mitch stomped on the gas. The engine roared in protest, but the diner's flickering neon lights soon cut through the storm, a lone beacon in the wilderness. He skidded into the parking lot, gravel crunching under the tires. The Admiral groaned as Mitch hauled him out, half dragging him toward the door. Inside, the warmth hit like a slap, the smell of coffee and grease thick in the air. The lone waitress looked up, her smile dying when she saw the blood. "Back room," she said without hesitation, tossing Mitch a first aid kit. "And for God's sake, lock the door." Mitch barricaded them in the storage closet, the Admiral now slumped on a sack of flour. He rifled through the kit, hands shaking as he peeled back the man's collar to clean the wound. That's when he saw it, a fresh bullet graze hidden under the blood. This wasn't an accident. Someone had shot at him. The Admiral's eyes snapped open, his hand clamping onto Mitch's wrist with terrifying strength. "Listen carefully," he whispered. "If I don't make it, burn the documents, not the police, not the Navy. Burn them." Then his grip faltered, and his head lolled forward, unconscious once more. Outside, the wind screamed against the diner's walls. Somewhere in the storm, headlights flickered on the highway, approaching fast. The storage room's single bulb flickered, casting long shadows over stacks of canned goods and flour sacks. Mitch propped Admiral Whitmore against the wall, pressing a clean rag to the bullet graze. The wound wasn't deep, but the Admiral's skin was clammy, his breathing uneven. The waitress Lena, her name tag read, brought hot water and whiskey without asking questions. "Keep him quiet," she muttered, eyeing the Admiral's uniform. "We get truckers in here, not Navy brass." Then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her. Mitch poured whiskey over the wound. The Admiral jerked awake with a gasp, his eyes wild until they landed on Mitch. For a second, neither spoke. Then Whitmore reached into his coat, fingers fumbling for the hidden documents. "Still there," he rasped, more to himself than Mitch. The papers were wrinkled, smeared with blood, but the red classified stamp glared like a warning. Mitch looked away. He didn't want to know. His dad had carried secrets home from Vietnam, and they'd eaten him alive, whiskey and nightmares until the end. Some burdens weren't worth shouldering. But the Admiral was shaking now, not from cold but fear. "They'll come for these," he said, thrusting the papers at Mitch. "You saved my life, now I'm asking you to save theirs." Mitch didn't take them. "I'm just a trucker," he said flatly. "Whatever mess you're in, I can't fix it." Whitmore's face hardened. "That SUV didn't crash, it was forced off the road. And the men who did it won't stop until—" A cough racked his body, cutting him off. Outside, the diner's bell jingled. Voices. Too many for a blizzard night. Mitch tensed, ear pressed to the door. Boots scuffed linoleum. A man's voice, calm and cold. "We're looking for someone." Lena's reply was sharp. "Ain't seen nobody but drunk locals." A pause, then quieter. "Check the back." Adrenaline burned through Mitch's veins. He grabbed the Admiral's arm, hauling him up. "Back exit. Now." Whitmore swayed but stayed upright, shoving the documents into Mitch's hands. "If they find us, run. These can't disappear." Mitch didn't argue. He stuffed the papers into his jacket, shouldered open the fire exit, and plunged them both into the storm. The alley was a wind tunnel, snow stinging their faces. Mitch dragged the Admiral toward his truck, praying the engine would turn over. Behind them, the diner's back door slammed open. A shout. Mitch didn't look back. He shoved Whitmore into the cab, scrambled behind the wheel, and twisted the key. The engine sputtered once, twice, then roared to life. Tires spun on ice as Mitch floored it, the truck lurching onto the road. In the rearview mirror, figures emerged from the diner, silhouettes against the neon glow. One raised a hand, not waving but pointing, at them, at the truck, at the secrets now burning a hole in Mitch's pocket. The Admiral slumped in his seat, eyes closed. "They'll keep coming," he murmured. Mitch gripped the wheel tighter. He knew it. And yet, for the first time in years, he didn't feel like just a trucker. He felt like his father's son. The blizzard had finally exhausted itself by dawn, leaving behind a world hushed and glittering under a thin coat of ice. Mitch's cramped apartment above the auto garage was silent except for the Admiral's ragged breathing from the couch. He hadn't woken since they'd arrived hours earlier, though his fingers still twitched occasionally toward the empty spot where the documents had been. Mitch had hidden them inside his old Army footlocker, the one thing in the apartment his father had left him. A floorboard creaked as Mitch paced to the window, peeling back the curtain just enough to scan the parking lot below. Empty, for now. His reflection in the glass looked like a stranger, dark circles under bloodshot eyes, 2 days' worth of stubble. The coffee in his hand had gone cold hours ago. He should have been on the road to Spokane by now. Should have been anywhere but here, playing nurse to a man who smelled like government trouble. The Admiral groaned, stirring beneath the threadbare blanket. Mitch was at his side in 3 strides. "Welcome back," he muttered, pressing a glass of water into Whitmore's shaking hands. The older man drank greedily, water spilling down his chin. When he spoke, his voice was sandpaper rough. "How long was I out?" "Long enough for me to regret this," Mitch said, but there was no heat in it. He'd cleaned and stitched the Admiral's wounds as best he could, using skills he'd learned patching up his dad after particularly bad nights. The memory left a bitter taste in his mouth. Whitmore struggled to sit up, wincing as the movement pulled at his stitches. His eyes darted around the sparse apartment, the peeling wallpaper, the hot plate in the corner, the photo of Mitch's father in uniform on the dresser. "Your military family," he observed. "Was," Mitch corrected sharply. He didn't miss how the Admiral's gaze lingered on the footlocker. "Those papers are still here, for now." A sudden pounding at the door below made them both freeze. Not the polite knock of a neighbor. This was authoritative, insistent. Mitch's pulse roared in his ears as he crossed to the window again. 3 black SUVs idled in the lot, their windows tinted dark as oil. Men in crisp uniforms stood at his doorstep, their breath fogging in the cold air. Navy. But not just Navy, 2 war insignia Mitch didn't recognize, their posture too perfect, their eyes scanning the building like predators. Whitmore was on his feet now, swaying but alert. "They found us," he breathed, not surprised, resigned. Mitch's mind raced. Back door, fire escape, but the Admiral gripped his arm with surprising strength. "Listen to me. Those men downstairs aren't here to rescue me." His voice dropped to a whisper. "They're why I was running." The pounding came again, louder this time. A voice called out, calm, polite, and utterly terrifying. "Mr. Callahan, we'd like to speak with you about your passenger." Mitch's hand drifted toward the footlocker, toward the secrets that had already cost them both so much. The Admiral's grip tightened. "They can't get those documents," he hissed. "If they do, people will die. Good people." Outside, a car door slammed. More voices, more boots on gravel circling the building. Mitch made his decision. He grabbed his truck keys from the hook by the door and shoved them into Whitmore's hands. "Garage out back, red pickup, go." The Admiral stared at him. "What about you?" Mitch was already moving toward the footlocker. "I'll buy you time." He hesitated, then yanked open the drawer of his nightstand, pulling out his father's old service pistol. It felt heavier than he remembered. The pounding turned to kicking. Wood splintered around the doorframe. Whitmore was at the window now, measuring the drop to the fire escape. He turned back, his expression unreadable. "You don't owe me this." Mitch checked the pistol's magazine. Full. His father had always kept it loaded. "Not doing it for you," he said quietly. A final crash from downstairs. The door gave way, boots on the stairs. The Admiral went out the window just as the first uniformed man burst through Mitch's apartment door. The pistol felt foreign in Mitch's hands as he faced the men flooding his apartment. 3 Navy officers in dress uniforms, their polished shoes tracking snow across his threadbare carpet. Behind them stood 2 others, men who moved like soldiers but wore no insignia, their eyes flat and assessing. The lead officer, a captain by his stripes, didn't even glance at the gun. "Mr. Callahan," he said smoothly, "we're here for Admiral Whitmore and the documents he stole." Mitch kept the barrel leveled, his finger resting alongside the trigger guard just like his father had taught him. "Stole," the word tasted bitter. The classified files were burning a hole in the footlocker at his back. The captain took a step forward. "Those papers contain sensitive intelligence. Their loss jeopardizes national security." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Hand them over and we'll forget you harbored a fugitive." A floorboard creaked near the window. Mitch didn't dare look, but he knew Whitmore hadn't left. The old bastard was still on the fire escape, listening. Mitch forced a laugh. "Funny, the Admiral said you'd say that." He shifted his grip on the pistol. "Also said you're the reason he's got a bullet graze on his ribs." The captain's expression hardened. Behind him, the 2 plainclothes men reached inside their jackets. Mitch's pulse hammered in his throat. This was it. 5 against 1 in a shitty apartment he'd never liked anyway. Then tires screeched outside. Shouted orders. The captain's head snapped toward the window just as the door burst open again, this time revealing a squad of armed Marines in full combat gear. At their head stood a gray-haired man with a vice admiral's stars on his collar, his face like thunder. "Captain Rowlands," the newcomer boomed, "you are relieved of duty." The change was instantaneous. Rowlands paled. The plainclothes men froze. The Marines swept in, disarming them with practiced efficiency. Mitch barely had time to process what was happening before Whitmore climbed back through the window, his face drawn with pain but triumphant. "Took you long enough, Hargrove," he rasped. The Vice Admiral Hargrove ignored the quip, striding to Mitch and extending a hand. "Mr. Callahan, the United States Navy owes you a debt." Mitch didn't take the hand. He lowered the pistol slowly, his mind reeling. "Someone want to explain what the hell is going on?" It was Whitmore who answered, sinking onto Mitch's couch with a groan. "Captain Rowlands and his friends were selling secrets. I discovered it, tried to expose them." He touched his bandaged side. "They disagreed with my methods." Hargrove nodded grimly. "We've been tracking this leak for months. When Whitmore went dark with those documents," he trailed off, glancing at the footlocker, "you kept them safe. More than that, you kept him alive." Mitch exhaled sharply. All this for some papers, for secrets that got men killed, just like his father's war. He crossed to the footlocker, flipped it open, and thrust the crumpled documents at Hargrove. "Take them. I want no part of this." But Hargrove didn't move. "It's not that simple." He reached into his own jacket and produced an envelope. "Admiral Whitmore insists you're exactly the kind of man we need." Mitch took the envelope with numb fingers. Inside was a job offer: military logistics, chief transport coordinator for the Pacific Fleet. Salary triple what he made hauling freight. Benefits. A future. Whitmore met his gaze. "You could keep driving, just for people who actually deserve your loyalty this time." The apartment was too quiet. The Marines had dragged Rowlands and the others away. Hargrove waited by the door, giving them space. Mitch stared at the paperwork, his father's face smiling up at him from the dresser photo. 3 days later, Mitch stood at Arlington in a new suit, the folded flag from his father's coffin tucked under one arm as Admiral Whitmore pinned a commendation medal to his lapel. The winter sun was weak but bright, glinting off the rows of white headstones. "You did good, kid," Whitmore murmured, stepping back. Mitch touched the medal, then the flag. For the first time in years, the weight felt different, lighter. Behind them, a convoy of Navy trucks idled, waiting. He took a deep breath and walked toward them. The Pacific sun burned hot on the tarmac as Mitch signed off on another shipment, his uniform sleeves rolled up past his elbows. 6 months had turned his trucker's tan into something more permanent, his hands steadier on the clipboard than they'd ever been on a whiskey bottle. The base buzzed around him, salutes exchanged, engines roaring, the smell of jet fuel and ocean salt thick in the air. A familiar voice cut through the noise. Callahan. Admiral Whitmore stood at the edge of the loading zone, his dress whites immaculate despite the heat. The scar from his bullet graze peeked above his collar when he tilted his head. Heard you turned down the promotion. Mitch shrugged, tapping his pen against the manifest. Like my trucks too much. The truth was simpler. He'd spent enough years running from his father's ghost. No need to outrank it. Whitmore studied him, then nodded toward a cargo plane being prepped across the runway. That one's yours. Classified hardware to Okinawa. Crews already briefed. He hesitated, uncharacteristic for a man who commanded fleets. You ever think about that night? The blizzard, the blood. The moment Mitch had almost pulled the trigger. He glanced at his reflection in a truck's side mirror, the Navy insignia on his hat, the metal gleaming against his chest. Not as much as I should, he admitted. Whitmore smirked. Good. He tossed Mitch a small box before turning to leave. Inside was a set of silver captain's bars. For when you're done playing civilian, he called over his shoulder. Mitch pocketed them with a quiet laugh. The wait wasn't unwelcome. That evening, as his convoy rumbled toward the waiting aircraft, he allowed himself one detour, past the base chapel, where a new plaque honored veterans of forgotten wars. He touched his father's name etched in the brass, the letters worn smooth by time and thumbs. Somewhere behind him, a ship's horn sounded in the harbor, long and low. Mitch adjusted his hat and kept walking. The trucks were waiting. As the cargo plane's engines roared to life, Mitch turned for one last look at the base, the sun dipping below the control tower, the waves crashing against distant docks. Somewhere out there, another trucker might be facing his own storm. Another veteran might need an unlikely ally. Stories like these don't end. They ripple outward. If this one moved you, hit subscribe. More tales of ordinary courage and extraordinary consequences are coming. And remember, next time you see a trucker fighting through bad weather, they might just be hauling more than freight. They might be carrying someone's second chance. See you on the next ride.